All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's plugin time. So, hey, we're gonna start working on a plugin, and that's gonna be a drop-down element that we can use in our apps. And yeah, we've been kind of wanting to do something along these lines, and finally getting around to it. So this is gonna be part one. Um, I'm guessing it's gonna be probably two parts to the whole series, maybe three, but part one. We're gonna get started. We're gonna kind of go over the way you think about your plugin, the way you kind of design it as you're getting into it, how to actually create the plugin, and we're going to go over some of the sections in the plugin editor and show what things actually do. So, part two, we'll get into the code. I'm going to go ahead and show you. So, the point of this plugin is that Bubbles Bubble has a drop down element, right? And they have a search element. Both work very well. However, I really often need a combination of those two. I need a drop down where you can click on it, you can immediately see options without typing, but you can also search and limit the options that you can see with a search box. So that's the reason for building this element, and follow along. By the time we're done, you should be able to have your own element and play around with it, and hopefully this is a lot of fun and good learning for everyone. So I'm just going to show you. Oh, no, I don't want to activate my trial bubble. So this is the element actually we're building, and we're not going to go into the code at all today. We're not going to go into why we selected this particular library, but I like this look. So here's the drop down. It has a search box here, so you can see it starts searching down the options. The options are here to just point and select as well. And then you have the ability to disable specific selections and some kind of neat functionality around that as well. So this is ultimately the element that we're going to have in our Bubble app. And so just want to show you that before we get started so you kind of know what the end goal is here. So let's go ahead and build the plugin. So we're gonna go to our My Plugins tab, and here we'll click on this big blue button, New Plugin, and we're just gonna name this 1T, and then I was gonna go with Slim Select, but let's just go with Drop Down for now. I might change that later, but so Slim Select is the name of the JavaScript library we're going to use, but I'm just kind of thinking through if people are searching for a plugin, they're probably going to be searching dropdown or something with search. So we'll just go with 1T dropdown for now and hit create. So this will create the plugin, and it's just like creating an app in Bubble. Now we have a plugin that we can work in and we can build. So you can see we have public name here of 1T dropdown, public logo. We'll replace that at a later time. So description, this is what you see on the plugin page. When you go to the plugin page and you're reading, you actually see this actually in the plugin display in your editor as well. Service URL, normally the link to the page where the user can get help if they need it. And then instructions is where the rundown of how to set the plugin goes, set up the plugin goes, and then demo page here. This is just a link to a front end page, a run mode page that shows the plugin in action. So, and then plugin categories. So none of these categories ever really fit what I'm building. I'm just gonna be honest, like this is an element, it's a front end, it's design, like, but there's no like UI category here. So I'm probably just going to select, let's see, I mean blog, email. I'm not sure how a plugin would apply to blogs, but let's just say technical and data, because it's essentially displaying data ultimately and helping with the management of data. So, okay, very cool. Let's go ahead and we'll jump down here into the shared tab. So this is simply this is data that's shared by the entire plugin, right? So you have the ability to add code into the HTML header. And if you add it here, if the user installs the plugin, this code, any code that's put into this HTML header in the shared tab, will be loaded on every page, regardless of whether a specific element is being used. So I typically stay away from the shared header unless there's a very specific reason why I would need that code on every page. But if we're doing elements, we have the ability to add a header to the page only for when that element is on the page. So, and then additional keys. These are the keys that show up in your plugin display when you're on the plugin tab, and you can add like API keys and all that. So, and the shared asset and resources is a place where you can actually upload files that will install with the plugin. It's just a local reference to maybe a CSS styling file or even JS or something like that. So API calls, this is the API connector. It's just if you want to build a plugin and to hold your API calls. Now, one of the nice things with this that the API connector doesn't have is that if you create an API in a plugin, you're going to get access. You're going to be able to set up like dev and live API keys, whereas the API connector doesn't allow you to do that. Elements, this is where we're going to be working. This is where you create the element that shows up on the page. This is an actual bubble element that you can drag onto your page. We'll come back to this. Actions. So actions are, and we'll just jump into this real quick. This is an event, right? Click here to add an event. An event triggers a workflow or a series of actions, right? So an event is something that kicks off an action. It's a button click, it's a page load, it's a do when true. It's anything like that that's going to trigger your trigger a series of actions. So if we look here, we'll just say page is loaded. And then this is an action. So an action actually sits within a workflow, and we can create those actions here. And the difference here between an action in the Actions tab and an element, and so let's go ahead. We're just going to create our element, and I'm going to call this 1T dropdown as well. So actually, let me show you this, because this is, if you're going to be building plugins, it's something you really need to think through, you need to think about, because what you name this here is what it's going to, how it's going to look, or how that element will display in your elements tab, right? So if you put it in visual elements or input forms or whatever, that name is going to show up here. So if we go back into our editor, let's just show you this. So if we say drop down, and I see a number of plugins that do this, I just name it, it's a drop down, right? So if we hit OK, and in fact, I'm going to grab the, this is an app, by the way. So this is just a standalone app that I set up to test this plugin. You can do it that way. I actually normally have, I don't know, I have 3 or 4 apps that I just kind of use as test apps for my plugins. Because I'm making a video with this one, I created a separate app specifically to test this plugin. But you want to grab this ID right here from the URL, and then we'll add it right here. So this is app to test the plugin. If you just click out, but we'll select it, and then we'll actually just close that app out, and we'll hit go to test app, and this will automatically load in this plugin's test version into that app. But nope, I'm not going to upgrade right now. So if we go into plugins, we can see we have 1T dropdown testing, and then we have an elements, we have a dropdown. And if we go into the design editor, right? So now we have dropdown here, which is actually, we probably want to put this inside an input form category, right? Because it's not really a visual element, it's an input form. And so let's just refresh. You do have to refresh your editor for updates from your plugin to take place. So if we look here in, let's go to input forms. So now we can see we have drop down here, which is bubbles drop down. And we also have a drop down element here. And you can see if you don't define the drop down or the element name, it can get really confusing. So I've installed plugins and it's like, okay, now I have like 3 elements here in my list, and they all have the same name, and it just gets really confusing. So I always recommend, so y'all know 1T is what my plugins always have. So I would name this 1T dropdown, even though the main name of the plugin is named that. I'm going to name the element that as well. And then if we refresh, they're going to ask me that every time, aren't they? Now we have this drop down here, but instead of just saying drop down, it says 1T dash drop down. And it's just much clearer. It's like here, this is the 1T element. This is not the bubble element. So I'm going to move on from that. Just wanted to make a point of how that works. And in fact, we'll just grab an icon here. See. Boom, boom. No, I'll figure that out later. Okay. So, but here on an element, then we can also have what are called actions on the element. So it's an element action, and you've probably noticed that some plugins you will install and they're supposed to have actions, but those actions don't actually show up unless you put an element on the page, right? So that is these actions here. So if we're here in this workflow, I'm gonna go ahead and add an action here and just call it new action. And then I'm actually going to add a simple action here, and we'll just say standalone action. And so this action, if the plugin is installed, this action will always be available to your workflows. The element action here, this action, that because it's tied to the 1T dropdown, it will only be available if that element is on the page. So let's refresh one more time. Hit cancel, and if we go here into our workflow, so now we can click on action and I can type in standalone action, right? So this is the action we added here directly in the actions tab. But if I search this new action, there's nothing there. And that's because it's tied directly to the element. So I can now come in here into my input forms, grab this, drag it onto the page. And now if I go in here to my actions and I start searching for new action, now I have new action A1T dropdown. Okay, let's go get rid of those. That was just for demonstration purposes. I'll delete that. All right, perfect. Settings, this is where you publish your plugin, choose the license you want. You can do private, which is going to be only accessible to you, or I should say only accessible to applications that you actually authorize specifically here. Open source, that's going to be a free plugin that anyone can access. They can see, they can actually view the plugin setup, how it's set up, the code, anything like that. And then commercial, that is the license you're going to use if you want to have a plugin, a paid plugin, you want to sell the plugin. So GitHub, you can synchronize with GitHub. It's just a way of basically a code storage locker. And we're not going to get into that, but you do have the ability to synchronize to GitHub, make changes in GitHub, and synchronize it back into the plugin editor. And then you can also add additional people who can work in the editor with you. Reviews tab just shows you the reviews. There's not really anything else you can do there. All right, so we're going to jump into the elements, and let's just start thinking through this plugin. What do we need it to be? So if we just kind of go down through, so we have bubble properties. The second step here is bubble properties. And so let's just think through it. Resizable. Do we need to be resizable? Yes, we do need to be resizable. So let's check that. Do we need to be responsive? Yes, we do need to be responsive. So then these selections will give you the selections in the property editor that you're used to. So let's just refresh here. We're going to look at the property editor for this plugin. Oh dear God. Okay, so let's look at the property editor for this plugin as it is right now. So if we double click here on this plugin element, you can see we don't have any of the normal options here. We don't have fonts, we don't have background options, we don't have border options, etc. Here in the layout, we do have responsive and size options. And that's because we clicked the resizable and the responsive checkboxes. And just to illustrate this, so if we go in here, let's just say we select borders and padding and font style, then we refresh. And now if we look in this property editor, now we have our font styles, we have border settings, we have padding settings. I guess we did not select background, but you get the idea. That's where that is all set right here. That's what happens with setting these. So we're not going to do borders or padding, and I don't think we're going to do font at this point. At least not for this part of the video. We may add that so that we have the ability to set the font directly. But all of these, then, we do have access. So when we go to actually add the code, we have access to what's called the properties.bubble object, right? And so you can access what the user has defined as their font size, as borders, as padding, etc. Okay, let's see. Can it fit width to content? Let's just say yes. That's going to be an available option, and probably fit height to content should be an available option as well. So support hovered and press states. That's not really needed on this element. We're going to manage pretty much anything along those lines inside the code. Support standard visible properties. Yes, I think there's probably the possibility that someone would want to have it hidden and then show it. We don't need to support uploading large files. And let's see, auto binding. That may be something we want to add. We're going to leave it unchecked for now. So, all right, so let's just look down at the default dimensions, and we can see. So this is the default dimension, right? That's currently happening. Why is that letting me select that? Let's just delete it off the page. If we grab this element and drop it out, so a drop down is never going to need to be this size. The ratio is off, the size is way off. So let's give it something that makes a little more sense, and we'll just say default width is going to be 200 pixels, and then let's give it a default height of 40. That sounds probably right. And we'll refresh. And now you can see, so here, well, let's just drag a new one out here. All right, so now that's the new default size. As much more realistic as far as an input goes, and so we'll just leave it at that. And okay, so now we're at fields. Fields are the input to the plugin, right? So fields are, let's just add one field here. So we'll just say test field, and we'll just make it a text. Let's refresh. Decline the upgrade option. And so now we look here in the property editor. Give it just a second to load. Okay, so here's our test field. This is that is the impact that the fields have on your plugin. They give you the ability to send data directly into the plugin. And so now we're looking at the fields. We need to think, what are the inputs that we're going to need to create for a dropdown? So likely we're going to need some kind of a placeholder, right? So let's just delete this out. We're going to need to be able to set the placeholder. We'll create that. And I'm going to make this dynamic value simply because that can be set as static or it can be set with an expression. And that's really the difference in the dynamic value is it gives you the little blue expression box so you can create whatever expression you want. All right, so we're going to have a placeholder. If we think through, we're going to need to define the type of options, right? We're going to need to send a list of the options. We will need to define what field of those options. So we're going to build it so that we can send actual data type into the dropdown, right? So I had to define what field we need to be able, we want to see in the dropdown options. So like if we were sending, you put a list of users, we'd probably want to define either first name or maybe first last name as the field that's shown. Probably need to define an initial content or a default value for it. And so we'll just start there. So let's say we're going to define next the data type. So we'll just say data type. We're going to create a new field. And then this will be, so app type is a reference to the data type in your plugin. So app type is going to give us access when we use that field to what we have set here. All right, and then we're going to send a list of options. So let's just say, we'll just say list of options. Let's keep it simple and easy to understand. And then this will also be a dynamic value. It's going to be a type, it's going to be a list, right? And then the type of data is going to be as data type. So we have data type set here as an app type. So this will require that the list of options is a list of the same type that we set as our data type. So I feel like that's a little bit talking around myself. So let's just refresh here. And let's open this back up. Wait for bubble. Okay. So we have our placeholder, right? So we would just say maybe select a character. And then, so now we have list of options and we have data type. So data type, we're going to select character. That's a data type I have set up here. And then list of options. So we can say do a search for users, right? And it's not going to resolve. It's not a completed expression. It can't be resolved to this type of data type. So if we do search for characters though, now we get that holy grail of the blue text that we have a resolved solution here. We're telling the plugin, we're going to send you characters, and here is a list of characters that we're going to send to you. Okay, let's jump back here, and let's go ahead and we're going to set the default value. So we'll create that as, in fact, let's just add value there, and then this will be a dynamic value as well. So this will be exactly like the list of options because we have to send a value of the same data type, but it's not going to be a list. So it's going to be a single option because we are building a single select dropdown, right? If we were building a multi-select, then that would probably need to be of type list. But because we're building a single select dropdown, this is just going to be a single, you can only have one option as a default value. And then let's define the field that we want to be displayed as the option. So we'll say display field. Let's create that. And this is going to be, so we have fields of data type. And so by defining this, this will give us a drop down that's a list of only the fields on the data type that we've selected. We can restrict these to different types. We're not going to do that. But let's see, we do need to set a couple of these as optional. So placeholder, we're going to make optional because we don't have to have a placeholder. And default value, we're also going to make optional because you don't have to have a default value. But we do have to set the data type. We do have to pass a list of options, and we do have to define a field. So on every setup with the element, we're going to have to do those three. So we're going to leave those as required. And we will refresh now. Double click. All right, so now we can see we have the placeholder, we have the character, we have the list of options. We can set our default value here. And now we have, we have a list of fields that we can display as the option. So we're just going to choose the display field, and that's it. So at this point, I think we have all the input fields that we need for the dropdown. We can pass all the data that we need to it for it to operate and function properly. So let's go back into our plugin editor, and we're going to just move right on down to the next step. And we're going to say exposed states. So an exposed state it's just like a custom state in Bubble. It's where we're going to put a value, right? So if we think about the dropdown, we need to define, we need to expose the value that has been selected, right? So let's just say selected value. Actually, let's just say selected option. And then this will also be returned. This is going to be of that same as data type that we set here. In fact, while we're here, I'm going to change this to default option. Just so we're using like a lot of the same phrasing. So, and then these captions, this is where you can get some of those kind of weird actions and state access. So you want to think about this. The way this will be presented in Bubble will be 1T drop downs, selected option, right? And so you want to think about it, the what you set as the caption as coming after those two words. So 1T drop downs, selected option, and that's how it will show. So when someone selects an option, or when there's a default option selected, then we're going to populate this state with that data. And we'll refresh. And let's just grab, I'm going to throw a group out here so that we have access to a condition. And so now we can see, we can do 1T drop down A's, selected option, right? So cool. So that's ready. We're ready to be able to, we're almost there. And in fact, that would probably be enough. Let's just look at one more scenario here. So we're going to look at events. And we can think like maybe we do want to add an event that says when a new selection is made, that we trigger this event, right? So when a new selection is made, we're going to trigger an event so that the bubbler doesn't have to like listen for a change on that state. They don't have to set up some kind of do when true or something like that. And so I actually just talking through it, I think it's probably something we should do, right? So let's just think. So when someone makes a selection, we're going to trigger this event, and we're going to give the bubbler access to it. And so let's just say, we'll just say a selection is made. That sounds fine to me. Excuse me. A selection is made. We're going to create this new event, right? So when a selection is made, and think that should do it. So we're going to do one more refresh, coming to the end of this first part. And now here in our workflow, remember, events are what trigger things. Actions are what happens after something has been triggered. So if we go into our event, we go into elements, and now we can see a 1T drop down, a selection is made. So we actually need to, let's just go back in and let's just take the A off the front of that, right? Because it makes sense just looking at the event, a selection is made, but we had to think through, how does this look in bubble? All right, so we're going to refresh one more time. Decline the upgrade, and now we look here. Okay, so now we have a 1T drop down, selection is made. Perfect, that makes sense. It reads well. The element is 1T drop down A, and now when this triggers, so whenever we trigger this event from within the plugin, this will run. Any actions that are set up inside this will be run. And so often what we would do, right, is we would maybe set a state, or we would make a change to something, and then that value would be 1T drop down A's selected option, which is that exposed state that we created. So we aren't going to need any actions on this plugin, and the rest of this is starting to get into the code, the JavaScript, which is fun. So I know we didn't really build anything today, nothing that's visible, but I think it's really important to understand how to think through your plugin, right? Think through what you need, what are the inputs, what am I going to do, how do I set this up? And this is really the process that I take with all of my plugins, is what is the minimum that I have to have to build this plugin? What are the minimum inputs? What are the minimum states that make this plugin functional and usable? And then it can be expanded. But that's the way you keep them simple. The values that are exposed, the events that are created, the actions that are available to the user, and the way inputs are structured and the way you collect that data makes a big difference in how usable your plugin ultimately is. So it's very easy to get too complicated. I think we have the perfect setup right now. We're just collecting the data we need. We're exposing only what we need to expose. We're only creating the events that we need to create. And so I'm excited to jump back in here in part 2. But for now, that's going to be it. We'll come back. We'll pull the Slim Select JavaScript library, and we'll go all the way through and create this actual element so that it's something usable in your Bubble app. So hopefully you learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing you next time.